And we are now under the new business, item G2, the approval of request to change the name of Christenberry Road to Edenberry Drive, and public hearing. That is found on page 258 of our agenda. I'll call on I have Lee Snuggs. Mr. Snuggs, if you'll please come up.
Thank you. Good evening. This is the request for name change for what is currently Christenberry Road off of Cox Mill, where it goes down towards DeRida Road. I did put the map up for reference. This is because of confusion that our dispatchers and first responders have experienced in responding to emergency calls due to the proximity of Christenberry Road, its closeness to Christenberry Parkway. Concord's city manager did take this before their board, and it was approved. And just another update, it was Christenberry, B-E-R-R-Y. A few residents had contacted us, as a matter of fact, this morning in reference to change it to Edenberry, B-U-R-Y, so it kind of keeps a little bit of the Christenberry. So that was fine with me, and Concord approved it as well. So everything has been approved, and I think we're ready to move forward.
Last time we were there, it was important to get the landowners to notified about this. Were they notified?
Yes, sir. They were sent letters and no responses. And
I believe that there was no residents that are on that address. This is the last time we met. You talked about that.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Mr. Snuggs?
And the proper spelling then is E-D-E-N-B-U-R-Y?
B-U-R-Y. Instead of B-E-R-R-Y, B-U-R-Y, correct. And that was acceptable. So.
Okay. I'll open up this for public hearing. Anybody like to speak for or against the road name change from Christenberry, B-U-R-Y, Road to Edenberry, E-D-E-N-B-U-R-Y Drive? Seeing nobody, I'll close the public hearing.
I move we approve the road name change, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion to approve the name change from Christenberry Road to Edenberry, B-U-R-Y Drive. We have a motion. We have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion carries. Next is the...
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Snuggs. The next is the presentation of the schedule of values for 2012 revaluation public hearing. And I will call on Mr. Wiesner to present, and then we'll have a public hearing. And while he's walking up here, there is no vote to be taken tonight. That will be done in October's meeting, I believe. Is that
That's correct?
Thank you, Mr. Wiesner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the schedule of values has been in the hands of the board for the last month and been available for the public to review. We have fielded several calls about the schedule and had discussions, and I think we've resolved most of those issues. One of the big issues we had was the one that was discussed tonight about the base rate on residential property dropping from $71 to $70. And my answer to that is that we can't just look at the base rate and make a decision about what that's going to do to the value, because there's other issues that come into play, such as the depreciation that we use, as the market factor that we may use. There could be economic obsolescence applied to a particular neighborhood. The base rate of $70 is based on cost. And of course, ultimately what we're going to do is look at the market value. And cost typically sets the upper end of value, especially in an economy like we're in today. So you go into a particular neighborhood and the market may not substantiate that $70. If it doesn't, then we have to make adjustments to those values. So if it's selling for $50, then we've got to adjust it to $50, and that's an economic obsolescence issue or a market issue. Also, the biggest thing of volatility in any revaluation is the land value. When things are going good, land value is going to jump high. When things are going bad, land value is going to drop. And so we have to consider how much the lot values are. In the assessment in 2008, a typical lot would be worth 20 to 28% of the total value of the property. But in an economy like we're dealing with today, that relationship may be 10 to 15% of the value of the property. So you can't judge it just by the base rate that we've applied. And as far as the other question concerning Mr. and Mrs. Barnhart's property, and I have looked at that property in the past, and I know that the value in 2008 was established by investors in that particular neighborhood, speculating on the fact that that property will eventually go commercial. Now, whether or not that's still the case for this revaluation, I don't know, because I haven't looked at it yet, but we will take a close look at that. And I will remind everyone that we are available to discuss these schedules with anyone who has a question about them. Just give us a call, come by the office and sit down and talk with us about it, and we'll explain them to the best of our ability. Be glad to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Wiesner? Got a couple from the earlier comments that I want to make certain that I understand it correctly. Is in regards to Mr. and Mrs. Barnhart's concerns, you said that you will look at that, or we make certain, it has not been looked at that you know of right now?
Not that I'm aware of, but will.
But you're going to make certain you look at that to make certain is it investor driven or not?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, we look at each neighborhood in the county and make a decision about the market within that neighborhood.
Okay. Now, another question that Mr. Barnhart, I believe, brought up was a concern that the stick-built home was used as a comparison to a mobile home, and is that done?
No, that's not correct. And in fact, I do know.
And I may have misstated what he said, but I think in essence, the question was a stick-built home versus a mobile home.
No, we know that it's a double-wide mobile home, and we know that we use other double-wide mobile homes to make those adjustments, or we look at homes or properties within the neighborhood that is sold. The investor-driven market within that neighborhood last time, the land value was what drove up the value of those lots. If that double-wide and its lot were located somewhere else, then it would have been worth considerably less. It wouldn't have had an $80,000 lot in a $125,000 property.
The upkeep of a neighbor's property, if it's poor, does that affect your value, or in the neighborhood's value?
Well, it could. That's a decision that the appraiser has to make in looking at the property, and certainly if the neighborhood itself has dropped in maintenance and it's on the decline, then that could have an impact in the market. But if you're looking at a neighborhood that's converting from residential to commercial, it may not be such a negative thing, because ultimately tear down is the result of that.
Okay. Another question that was brought, or another statement that was brought up, was certified appraiser versus a county appraiser. I'm not certain. I know what an appraiser is. I didn't know there was such a thing as certified versus county.
Well, we have both kinds on staff. We have, if you're out and doing fee appraisals for banks and savings and loans, so forth, then you get a certification through the state of North Carolina as a certified fee appraiser. We have 3 of those on staff that have that certification. Now, if you get most of your appraisal experience at the county level, it's pretty difficult to get that, because that is designed for private fee appraisers. So what we have, our other appraisers are certified by the Department of Revenue. So they have to take a certain number of courses to be certified. They have to have a certain number of years' experience, and then they have to take continuing education. They have to take 30 hours of continuing education every 2 years. All of our appraisers do that, and most of our appraisers have significant experience.
Is there, when you appraise a property, does a certified appraiser appraise it differently than a county appraiser?
Not substantially. I mean, we do mass appraisal, and so it's a different technique.
Okay.
But ultimately, we do the same types of things. We consider the same types of things that a fee appraiser would look at. A fee appraiser will go into a neighborhood and pick 3 comps and make adjustments to that property. We, as mass appraisers, go into that neighborhood, look at every sale that's occurred in the neighborhood. Matter of fact, we look at every sale that's occurred in the county, and we come up with these schedule of values and the way we apply these schedules to come back to a value on each property.
One question that wasn't raised tonight but has been asked of me earlier is foreclosures. How do foreclosures figure into revaluation?
Well, you can't, of course, ignore the fact that they're there. You have to look at them. Foreclosures do not qualify under the definition of an arm's length transaction, and our charge is to appraise everything based on arm's length sales. That being said, if you go into a neighborhood and there's no arm's length sales in that neighborhood, what you would have to do is look for other neighborhoods that have those type of sales. But if the market for a particular neighborhood is driven mainly by bank sales, then you've got to have some consideration of that.
Okay. In regards to some other questions, the base rate, how did we come up with, or how did you come up with the base rate of $70 a square foot? I mean, $70 a square foot.
Well, we looked at what it would cost to build. Our schedule is based on an average house being a 3-bedroom, 2-bath frame, 1,600 square foot house. And that's what our 100% house is. So our base rate is based on what it would cost to replace that type of house. Now, we went a little step further this time on that, and we took a look at every sale of every house in the county that we considered average quality. And we looked at the 70, at first we thought, okay, a $75 base rate would be a good cost base rate. But when we applied that, then we were high. And so what we did is we backed off on the base rate to get it closer to 100%. If we look at these sales and we look at what we thought the land value was, then we wanted to be about 100% on those, and that's building in some economic obsolescence on every house in the county. From there, we look at each neighborhood, and again, if the neighborhood needs adjustment down or up from there, then we will do that.
Okay. And I don't remember the actual name, but it was S&P Case. Do you have any idea that what Miss Case Schiller? Do you know where? Do you have any idea where they came up with a base rate of $71? I believe it was, or
that $71 he was showing was our 2008 base rate.
Okay.
And he was comparing statistics, and that was logical.
Okay.
Way to look at it. We don't establish base rates that way. We look at actual facts within the county of Cabarrus County.
Okay. And there is an opportunity for anybody that has questions about the schedule of values to come into the tax administration office and sit down with someone and talk to them about their concerns?
That's correct.
Okay. And what are y'all's hours of operation to meet with people?
8 until 5.
Okay. Monday through Friday.
We'll stay late if we have to.
Any questions for Mr. Wiesner based on my questions?
A couple comments, if I could, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wiesner and his staff were very gracious and hospitable to me today to let me come in, and I had to fulfill some local government training requirements from what I call my mortgage paying job. But I killed 2 birds with 1 stone because I came in today and spent the full day in the reval department. And this morning I got a chance to actually sit down with Michelle Seaford, who has been with the county for 22 years as an appraiser, or I guess working in the tax department, appraiser the whole time. And Ms. Seaford was took me through one subdivision. She was a small subdivision to show how the process works from beginning to end, and then actually did my own neighborhood, including looking at my house and how that would be affected. And what I was looking at was if we drop the property, if the property values are going down, it's good likelihood I might not see my values go down, so I'd get a huge tax increase if we had to go revenue neutral. So, but people know that. But I've got a really good understanding of how you do the base rate, and then it's like 3 lists are pulled. One list shows all the sales that have occurred, or there's 2 lists. One is the qualified sales that have occurred in, say, a 2 or 3 year period, and then the unqualified sales, which are separated out, and then each one of those she individually investigated and looked at what the circumstances were, including reviewing the photos, reviewing the map, looking at the schematic, looking at the tax card, even pulled an MLS listing on one house that had been sold for a whole lot less than what the tax value was on it. What I saw was many layers of control and many layers of review that take place in reaching those property values. And then even when that's done, then they gave me a high level of confidence when you get your tax valuation form in the mail, that there's been a lot of things looked at on that already. But still, you have that right to appeal it. And then, of course, this afternoon going out with, you get a chance to actually do some physical field appraisal work on some residential properties. That was very interesting in how that is done. So I can tell you that from my standpoint, not everybody can come in and do that. Being able to do that today really helped me, it gave me a high level confidence that it's not just the old Kentucky windage that's done in determining what the value of property is in this county.
Yeah, we were very excited to have a commissioner come in and work with us for a day, and we invite all the rest of you to do the same.
There'll be another presentation October the 3rd, and then it'll be up for passage on October 17th.
That's correct.
So
And
what I would like to make certain is that as we get questions and concerns during this hearing tonight, as well as with informal public comments, that we can make certain we go back over those on October the 3rd and then October the 17th, if there's any unanswered questions, that we can make certain we have a better understanding as to the concerns or address the concerns of the community. With that, if there's no other questions, I will open this up for a public hearing. If anybody would like to speak about the, I'll get to you, Mrs. Barnhart, and to speak about the presentation of the schedule of values for 2012. Mrs. Barnhart, if you'd like to speak.
Yes, my name's Marilyn Barnhart. I live at 5800 Wabash Lane, Concord. I live in the city of Kannapolis since 1999. When he was talking just a few minutes ago about our property back in '08, saying that it was investors, okay, that's the reason why it was so high. I wanted to explain to him and to you all that Mr. Meeks has a sign up there that possibly commercial. He is selling the land, but it's got possibly commercial in there. He cannot sell anything in that Farm Hill unless we have 66 people in Farm Hill, okay, doing the restrictions. We have covenants in there that you cannot change the covenants unless 66 people agree to it out of 82. So he cannot sell that commercial, or anybody else can't sell anything commercial in there. And we do not have a buyer for Farm Hill, so we are still residential and have been since 2008 and a half. And that's what I wanted to say.
Can you say that about 2008 and a half? I didn't catch that.
Well, 2008 and a half is when everybody finalized that we weren't going to sell. Everybody agreed that,
so
you know.
Y'all were going to sell or try to sell it as a group, and then you stopped that you said no in 2008?
There was people that didn't want to sell, and
Okay.
so it was stopped after 2.5 years.
I just didn't understand I didn't catch what you said.
Yeah, 2.5 years since 2006 to 2008 and a half.
Okay.
That the deal was off the table, and there hasn't been a real estate agent or anybody come by since then, and I don't think they will.
Okay.
Just wanted to let him know that we're still residential, and it has not changed, and you have to have 66 people decide that.
66%.
66 people.
Okay.
Out of 82.
Oh, 82. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Barnhart. Jason, I think you wanted to come back up.
I want to thank Mr. Weissner. He did come over and speak with me in the recess and explain some of it to me. I had some additional comments on what he told me as well as what he told you. And while we're here tonight and sort of this is still in the sort of evaluation process, I wanted to speak with you about them, and then I will go back and speak with him about some other specific concerns. One thing he said was that the base rate was based on building costs as opposed to sales. And if you think about it, that really doesn't make sense either, because the base rate went from 60 to 71 cents in 4 years, and then went from $71 down to $70 in the last 4 years. And if you think about the building environment in 2008, if you're going to assume that it's just based on building costs, if you remember to 2008, oil was $130 a barrel, gas was almost $5, sheetrock was exceptionally expensive, and America's supply and demand. And so if housing prices are skyrocketing, then construction goods are skyrocketing as well, because the demand is significant and you can only produce so much. And conversely, if you think about 2012, there's not very much building going on, which means there's not very much demand, and all those prices have fallen, and yet they're only giving credit for a 1.4% decrease in the building cost, which it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me logically. The second issue is the S&P index that I cited that the federal government uses. The base rate perfectly tracked the increase, and it just seems to me that it's a little bit shocking to me that it's so contrasting with the decrease in the S&P index. And I'd be happy to provide the website. It's federal government use for that index. And finally, I do appreciate the fact that there are a significant amount of factors that they use after they come up with the base rate that Commissioner Cabarrus had mentioned and things like that, and also the appraisal factor. One thing I think we need to make sure of is the transparency, and I think the base rate is sort of the starting point. I'm not sure that if you start with something and then sort of jimmy with it, mess around with it until you get to where you want to go, that people are going to feel like that's transparent, as opposed to starting with a good base rate, that's a solid base rate, and getting to a number that's very close. And then maybe you fine-tune it a little bit. But I think more of the value is coming from the back end than it is the front end, and I think that's inverse to where it needs to be. And I do understand that there's an appraisal process that is expensive for the citizens of Cabarrus County to have to go out and get an appraisal done on their house. It's sort of unfair to ask everybody to go out and get an appraisal done when you can clearly track these indexes, and people do understand that there's been significant depreciation in the last 4 years. And also, it's just expensive for the county. The more appraisals that you have to handle, the more personnel that you have to assign to go back out and relook at those things. So I think it's just better for us all to come up with a number that is an accurate, true number and reflects the depreciation of the 4 years to start with, and be fair to people. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
And Jason, there was an opportunity, I know, to meet with Mr. Wiesner or somebody in his office. I hope you have a chance to do that.
Commissioner White, I will do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody else like to speak? I'll close the public hearing. There's no vote to be needed to take tonight. It's just to receive information. Next is G4, is the Economic Development Grant for Pregel America Incorporated, the expansion. And I know that Mr. Cox is here to present and talk some information, but also Mr. Cook. This is a little bit of a difference of what was already approved. I think in 2008 is what we have in our packet of information tonight.
That's correct. It's actually more of a phase type of project as it's presented now, as opposed to it having been at least initially proposed as one phase.
Right.
So it's apparently it's essentially the same project as I understand it. It's just being spread over a longer period of time and being done in these separate phases as opposed to being done all at one time.
Okay. Is there any questions for Mr. Cook or Mr. Cox? This is a project that was approved, and as I said, I think it was 2008.
And we're just changing basically the terms of or they asked for a change in the terms of the agreement that was.
In regards to the phasing of the project as opposed to all at one time.
I have a question for Mr. Cox. I just wanted to ask, this company that came here, and this is, assuming phase 2, they received an incentive grant whenever they decided to relocate to Cabarrus County, is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. That's what I want to know. Thanks.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion to approve the economic grant for Pregel Inc. and authorize the county manager and county attorney to finalize the documentation in regards to the phasing as opposed to all at one time?
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second. Discussion. Commissioner Meismer or anybody? We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Motion passes 3-2. Thank you. Next is the G5, is the Additional American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funding for weatherization. Mrs. Sifford.
Good evening. This is additional funds from the stimulus money that the state has had eventually put aside for training. They have offered it to agencies that have met the standards so far. We are the second agency to meet those standards. We actually set this amount based on our waiting list as we have it today. The money would only be available to those agencies that can move forward and have the ability to spend it. As we talked about before, Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mrs. Sifford?
If we, I guess, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, just, if we don't approve this, what happens?
Well,
We don't get the money, I know that, but
Yes,
but
we
other
don't
than
get the
that,
money.
what is this? Do we have other places we can go for funding to clear the waiting list out? Do we have to look at, as a board, maybe considering, appropriating some money out of, our local reserves to finish funding the weatherization program? Or is this, have we had waiting lists in the past? You know what I'm saying? Is this something that's,
well, we didn't have these kind of waiting lists in the past because, typically in the past, we marketed to the aging department, to DSS. We were somewhat smaller in scope. When this money came along, we had the commandment from the state to go forth and make ourselves known. And so that's what we did. And I went to DSS and talked to them, and I talked to all these different departments. We went to churches. We've been doing the outreach with DSS, the program that they just got the award for. We've been out there in the public eye a lot more. So we have a wait list that's a lot longer than we ever had before. We did start pulling the ads and backing off probably about 6 months ago because we saw that the end was coming. When we got close to it, we realized that we're going to have a little bit of people left over. If we don't take this money, if we don't go after this money, what we have right now will probably be a 2 to 3 year wait for service for some of these people. We're asked to do it in priorities order. The scores are generated by the computer, so it doesn't give me the opportunity to give any benefit to somebody unless there's some emergency that I can address. We currently have 26 people on the waiting list outside of people that are in some level of progress right now. We do have a few of those too. I have enough funds to do about 19 additional ones with the regular funding that we get every year. We had a truck out today on a street, and I had 3 families call me today that saw the truck. So it's really up to your interest whether you want to wipe out the waiting list, whether you're comfortable having the waiting list. We may be able to move through it faster. It really just depends on how complex the cases are. Some of them are going to be $7,000 jobs, and some of them are going to be $1,500 jobs. You don't know till you get there and you really start looking around. I did prepare kind of a list of a sample of who our clients are. The average income is $19,147. The average household size is 2, a little over 2. On this list, we have about 10 or 11 people that have a disabled person in the home. 3 of them are veterans. 3 of the units are mobile home versus stick. 1 is a rental unit. We discussed the rental units last time, and I went back to double check and see what we had left in the wait list. So that kind of gives you an idea of who's out there. So that's the type of people that are on our waiting list.
Commissioner Meader, I thought you were going to say something. Okay. I thought you were going to say something before Commissioner Ruth. Okay.
So there's 26?
Roughly 26 right now, and about 5 or 6 applications in process that look like they're likely to be approved.
And this is different from the rehabilitation program we do for the elderly.
Yes.
This separate program.
There are different programs. The weatherization deals only with energy cost, energy type items. The heating and air program deals with just heating and air. We have the housing and home improvement, which is probably what you're thinking of. It's up to $1,500, and it's usually related to accessibility, sometimes appliances, things like that. That is only for people who are 60 and over. The weatherization is income-based, so anybody can apply for that.
I know that, but also don't we have, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, public service, and I'm not sure Piedmont Natural Gas probably has the same thing of where you can actually have a program through the wintertime, so you will not have your utilities cut off if you can't afford to pay the bill. And Cooperative Christian Ministry runs a program as well where you can get assistance with utility bills. So not having this would not cause somebody to go without heating or for the winter
No,
time.
but I will tell you that it is, our common customer, their bills are usually high. And it is usually because they have a very drafty home or a very inefficient heat and air system, those type of things. And I would say 75% of our clients are behind in their payments to their utilities. They're making payments, but every month, I mean, we collect data for 24 months prior and 24 months after to really show that we're saving them money. And so we get a long-term look at what they're really doing each month, and you see what they're acquiring each month, but you see what they're paying each month and what's owed. And so you see there's a big discrepancy there. So it is fairly typical for them to be pretty far behind. And keep in mind, too, DSS has had to change their regulations. They can no longer turn somebody off once they get cut off. People have to get there in time to get that assistance before they get cut off.
They changed that 2 years ago?
Yes.
So that they saw a history of running, not paying for the oil at the end of the winter and waiting for the next year to catch it back up.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And we do have quite a trend of people cutting off their service during the summer months and trying to come back later. But of course, every time you do that, there's cost associated with getting it on and off and whatnot. So we have seen a big trend of people not being able to get stuff cut back on.
Good. Commissioner Meismer?
The ARA funds, this is federal funds?
Correct.
Commissioner Burge?
Will this $75,000 take care of those 26 homes you talking about?
I hope that it will. It should, between that and our regular funding. It really depends on how many people we get coming in. Now that our name's out there, I think we're probably going to see greater demand in the future just because everybody knows about it now.
This is federal funds, but it's coming out of our pockets.
Correct. It is federal funds. It is coming out of our pockets.
If we do not use these monies at all, then we're going to have a waiting list. And whatever monies we get next year, we'll be using to chip away at that waiting list.
Correct. We will move through it and we will economize and do the best we can. The big problem is with the new regulations on this money is that when you're monitored, if they find something that you should have done that you didn't do, we now have to pay for that. So we are extremely cautious on the first round in doing everything we possibly think that needs to be done to make sure that we don't get caught in the backup side where we have to pay for it.
And so if we get rid of the waiting list, then it is all likelihood we won't need the money in the future, or we won't need as much money in the future.
We hope.
Well,
yeah.
On theories, if we caught
That's
up our
my
waiting list, then
goal
we're not
is-
going to need the money next year or the year after, or we won't need as much money as we normally would.
Right. My goal is to try to get us back in line with what we had before, which was typically less than a 6-month wait.
Okay. And I just lost my train of thought. Okay. Any other questions?
Didn't you say you were using in-house to do this and not private contractors?
We have one private contractor still working for us, but we can use private contractors with the stimulus money, but we didn't set ourselves up to do it with our regular money. We set ourselves up to use our own crews with that. So if we don't get this, we'll wrap up what we have left of the stimulus money with them, which right now we're having to hand those jobs out basically one at a time because we're so low on health and safety funds. When the health and safety money runs out, we're just going to have to stop work. So we're having to hand them out very slowly to make sure that we don't overrun any cost.
Well, if you don't do it this year, it's probably going to cost more to do it next year.
Any other questions?
I don't have any questions. I just have general comments. There's 3 points I take issue with this. And the first one, I know we discussed renters being eligible for this program. And I understand that there hasn't been any in the past, but I guess there's one now that's on the waiting list.
No, we have had them in the
you have
past.
had 'em
And
in the
it's
past.
infrequent. It is infrequent.
Okay.
And again, I understand that,
Yeah.
a lot of people have issue with that. But the regulation is driven toward the client.
Right.
Because they're usually paying the power power bill.
Right. I just take issue with someone owning the apartment complex or what it may be that they're renting, and the property owner benefiting from those remodels. So I take issue with that. Also, I think this takes a lot of personal responsibility away from individuals by the government remodeling these homes or making updates. I think this is a personal responsibility that should be left in the hands of the individuals. And, this is federal funds, so the county wouldn't have to put in any dollars. However, as Commissioner Burge said, this is still tax dollars, and I think being good steward of tax dollars, regardless of where the funds are coming from, I just don't think this would be an appropriate expenditure.
Any other comments?
Just if I could, Mr. Chairman, because I've been kicking this around back and forth in my head for the last 2 weeks, and and Kelly does a tremendous job in running these programs for us, and it's sometimes a thankless job because but does a tremendous service to our community. And when I look at this, and after seeing the news the last few days and seeing this morning and watching the fact that the idea of we're doing $3 trillion in budget reductions, but half of it's coming from because we're not going to raise taxes, because we're going to raise taxes in some way, and that in and of itself is saving money. Okay, and then another portion of that is deciding that we're not going to have any kind of military emergencies that occur in the next 10 years, so we're not going to spend money on any wars that might come up. Okay, that's just, to me, I'm looking at it, and that's the reason I asked a question about, how much money did it take in federal revenue collected from this county for us to get $75,000 back? I would much rather do one of two things. Either us decide that we're going to eradicate that waiting list ourselves and appropriate funds out of our own fund balance to do that, to take care of the waiting list, or what I'd like to put a challenge out to is there's 26 households. I know that there are more than 26 churches in Cabarrus County, and if some of this is caulking, insulation, if every church would adopt one of these households, and this could be done, through a spirit of community cooperation to get these houses weatherized. And we also have a faith-based ministry based right here in Concord that specializes in doing this kind of work. We do it in the summertime all over the western part of the state of North Carolina. That I'm not saying that they can jump up and do it, but that we have, I think, the means to do it as a community without having to get the strings attached. And, because I just, in the past, I would not have batted an eyelash. I would have said, fund it. But I just have got, with what we have going on and what I see happening and the way compassion is coming. Someone know the first definition in the dictionary of compassion has Washington, D.C. by it. And someone know that the only way we can do it is if we go to Washington and get those funds. And what's happening is that I heard Steve Forbes this weekend coin the phrase, the welfare industrial complex. And what we're doing is in this country is there's a lot of jobs and a lot of things and that money is not going to people that need it. And that it makes me I really get upset when I hear that if we don't spend federal money on something and eradicate every problem in the world, that we're not being compassionate. Well, it's not being compassionate when you have to send $4 to Washington to get one back in services. When it can be kept and done locally, and we could eradicate the problem. If we put our heads together as a community, we could eradicate this waiting list. Not have to depend on Washington D.C. to do it. So that's my concerns. Now, if we,
That was a campaign speech you heard this morning. There wasn't no truth in it.
Yeah. Do we have a motion to provide direction to the staff by not obtaining additional ARA funding for the weatherization program?
I'll make that motion, and along with the challenge to our local community to rise up and contact Ms. Sifford to find out how we can. And I'm willing to even put a hammer in my hand too if I need to, and a caulk gun.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? The motion before us is providing direction to the staff that we do not obtain additional ARA funding for the weatherization program. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Next matter for us is G6, is the sales tax audit contract. I'll turn it over to Mr. Day.
Thank you. You're probably all aware that nonprofits and governments may file a request with the Department of Revenue to receive a refund on their sales and use taxes. Of course, that doesn't apply to schools, we all know, unfortunately. But so what happens often is when this happens, then, and the allocation that's given to the counties from the State Department of Revenue, a refund will hit, and so it's the amount of money that the county receives is reduced by that amount. Sometimes there are errors in the way this works. And for example, in Cabarrus County, there is a large distribution center for a hospital that's not located in Cabarrus County. And tens of millions of dollars of equipment and supplies flow through there. The home base or corporate headquarters for this organization is in Forsyth County. And so when all the billing and everything takes place that the vendors are sending, it goes to Forsyth County. The vendors issue a report to the state saying where they're paying these sales taxes. And they may mistaken where they're actually paid as the place where the corporate headquarters is, not the point of delivery, which is where the sales tax actually accrues. So when the nonprofit, in this case a hospital, files for a sales tax refund, they have the information from the vendors. They know how much they spent and how much was paid in sales taxes, and they know it all was delivered to Cabarrus County. And so they file that request as an expense that was a refund that should come from Cabarrus County's taxes. We know there are some problems with that. So what we're suggesting is a sales tax audit. There are a number of companies that perform these. Dixon Hughes Goodman was selected by Pam Dubois, our Deputy County Manager and Finance Director, based on qualifications and based on references from other counties. This company is currently doing these sorts of audits in 26 other counties. Unfortunately, these audits are all performed on a contingency fee basis, and the percentage of revenue recovered that they claim is between 20 and 35%, and that depends on the size of the recovery. So in small instances where the recovery is $50,000 or less, it's a 35% amount that's fee. In much larger cases, then it's a 20% amount. This is the best structure that's available right now from these firms, and this firm comes highly recommended. So and I should point out also that the cities, the municipalities will also benefit from this for any recovered taxes, and the cities are willing to pay their portion of the fee, so it doesn't all come out of the county's recovered revenues. So we're recommending that the board approve this contingency fee contract with Dixon Hughes Goodman, which has the unanimous support of the municipalities.
Are there any questions for Mr. Day?
I've got a question. Whenever a gap's found, or is it back taxes that they receive that 20 to 35%, or it's not reoccurring?
That's correct. It's just on what they actually recover.
Okay.
At that one
Just
time.
that, okay.
Right.
Any other questions?
When they do the audit, is it on the current year? Is it on last year? How far back can they go on the audit?
I wish I could answer that off the top of my head, but I can't. I believe it's 3 years. But I can get that information to you and I'll be happy to.
And I was thinking it was 3 years, but I wasn't 100% certain. And I guess I kind of base that a little bit on if you have agricultural property and you sell it because there's a break on the taxes for a farm. If you sell it then, and it's not used for a farm anymore, then we go back 3 years. So that's why I think that's why I was basing it on that. But there is some period of time that you can go back. Okay.
I saw the county attorney move forward, nod his head. Were you familiar with that?
I believe it's 3 years.
Well, that's interesting because the federal government go back, what, 7 years on personal taxes? Well, I think it's certainly something that need to be done. This is, it could be a substantial amount when it should not be in the first place. Now, when they do the audit, they will also be able to help us move forward to prepare and kind of look for this in the future? Okay. Any other questions? Do we have a motion to approve the contract between Cabarrus County and Dixon Hughes Goodman LLP and authorize the county manager to execute the contract on behalf of the county, subject to review and revisions by the county attorney?
So moved.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next that we have is appointments to the boards and committees. H1, Casey Taylor resigned from the Food Policy Council. I do want everybody to be aware that Mrs. Snellings is a neighbor of mine, so that if I need to recuse myself, I'll be happy to do so. Otherwise, is there a motion to appoint Mrs. Kayla Snellings to the Food Policy Council to complete an unexpired term ending December 31st, 2011?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Then under the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, also known as the JCPC, do we have a motion to appoint Mr. Stephen Ayers, member of the faith community, to the JCPC for a 2-year term ending September 30th, 2013. Motion to reappoint Terry Triplett, Police Chief / Designee, Jane Cawthon, DSS Director / Designee, Terry Stansel, member of the business community, Michelle Wilson, Local Health Director / Designee, Troy Barnhart, at large, Dawn Thomas, at large, and Marta Mears, at large, to be the JCPC for 2-year terms ending September 30, 2013, including exemptions to the length of service provisions of the appointment policy for Mr. Triplett, Mrs. Cawthon, Mrs. Stansel, and Mr. Barnhart. Do we have that motion?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have the reports from the Food Policy Council. This is the final assessment report. And I think it was good reading. I would encourage everybody to look at it and get a better understanding about that assessment. Is there any updates from the board, from this board, in regards to the liaisons for the various municipalities or the boards that we serve on? Okay, don't hear any. We have before us, we have applications for various county boards and committees. We certainly need applications for the Adult Care Home Community Advisory Committee. There's 4 vacancies. The Animal Protection and Preservation Advisory Committee, the Concord Planning and Zoning Commission, ETJ, Harrisburg Advisory Board, Fire Advisory Board, Industrial Facilities and Pollution Control Financing Authority, the JCPC, Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee. There's 7 vacancies there. And the Youth Council, is there, I think there is a vacancy.
There's 2 vacancies at Cox Mill High School.
At Cox Mill High School. So there is some opportunities for people to serve on the county boards and committees. If you would please take that under consideration and hopefully see something that you like and fill out an application. If you have any questions or you don't have access to email, or excuse me, if you don't have access to the internet, if you'll please contact the county manager's office at 704-920-2109. We certainly would appreciate that. One other thing, I neglected to contact Mrs. Honeycutt. We do need to go into closed session tonight for a personnel matter. Do we have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
And that is to invite John Day and Rich Cook into the meeting. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. After the closed session, we'll be adjourning for the evening.